Welcome back to our monthly market update. Today we're going to be covering August, everything that happened in August from the 1st to the 31st here in Kent County, as well as a July to August breakdown and a yearly breakdown, as well as how this benefits you as a buyer or a seller. I am a local Delaware realtor who services the entire state of Delaware, and yet I do live in Kent County and have for the past 10 years, so this is the area that I like to highlight. I can do the whole entire state if you guys would like, but for now I'm going to be focusing on Kent County, so if you're interested in what's happening in our little county, make sure that you follow along. In August, we saw things stay actually pretty steady. So units was 276 units that were listed. We ended the month with 682 homes still on the market. 180 homes went under contract, so they went pending. There is still 39 days on market, so about a month and a half-ish is what you're looking at for how long your average priced home could stay on the market. And then the average price for the month of August was $357,000. Now, if you wanted to compare July to August to get a little bit more insight and not just know August numbers, because if you have nothing to compare it to, you really don't know what it means. We saw an increase in end of month inventory. It went up just about 10 or so units. Pending also went up about 10 units. Days on market stayed the same. Price went up $7,000 and units listed actually went down about 10 units. So everything is actually kind of steady right now. We saw a little bit more of a increase in things from June to July, but as the summer months are winding down, we are seeing it start to stable out. I will say, looking into it, we are in the 10th of September when this is being filmed, and September is also looking to stay pretty steady so far based off of what I've been seeing. And so we'll see if that stays true to it, and we'll talk about that more when we get to the benefits for our buyers and sellers. Now that you have a little bit more insight on what's happening here in Kent County, I did want to broaden that a little bit and tell you everything that's happened from January 1st all the way to August 31st to give you more insight and kind of give you a broader picture. Like I mentioned before, when you're just looking at monthly numbers, it's kind of hard to tell where things are trending, if things have changed, what's going up, what's going down. And so when you have a larger picture showing you what's happened from, your year to date, that's going to make it a little bit clearer for you and give you a better idea of what's going to happen with our market. None of us have a crystal ball to tell you exactly what's going to happen, but it does give you an idea of trends because things do typically go one way or the other. Something that I found actually pretty interesting is that we're only in August, and yet we're seeing 2,099 homes that have been listed for the year, which is up over 2023 and 2024. 2024 did have a slight dip. It ended up going about like 20 units under, and right now we are actually about 100 units up from last year, and we haven't even finished the year out yet, so that is a good sign that there are more homes coming to the market. Pended units have actually gone down about 1.6%. We've had 1,300 homes go under contract this year, and yet it is still slightly down. Monthly supply, like I just mentioned, with more units being listed, that does help our monthly supply. So that is actually up 37%. We are at 3.7 months of inventory, so we are still in a seller's market by the numbers. If it were to be a buyer's market, you would have to, or a steady market, which essentially would go into a buyer's market pretty quickly, you would have to be at about 6 months inventory. So we're not quite there yet, but we are definitely getting a little bit closer. And then days on market for the entire year so far is 46. So that doesn't deviate too far from what our monthly one was. That was 39. 46 doesn't deviate too far from that, but it does give you some perspective. And the average sales price from the 1st of January all the way to the end of August was $359,000. Again, a little bit of perspective, that's only about $2,000 higher than what the month average was. And that also gives a little bit perspective of, since that's a little bit higher, our days on market would be a little bit higher, just because the higher your price point, typically the longer your home will be on the market. So just things that you need to be aware of. Units sold is down so far. We are about 80 houses down from the previous year, so I have no doubt that will definitely surpass that before the year ends from last year's goal. But as of right now, we are 1494. It's definitely going to be surpassed, especially because we've seen how many units are listed. Another thing to keep in mind, I don't have that number on hand, but I'll make sure that I have it next month. But it's interesting to see how many houses have been withdrawn or canceled. Gives you perspective on, even though listings are higher, that doesn't always necessarily mean that that house will be sold. So just something to keep in mind when you're looking at all of these numbers. I mentioned that I was going to be talking about benefits for both our buyers and our sellers, and yet we did have some things change in this past week and the past couple of days specifically. So I did want to talk about our buyers first. If you haven't heard, recently the rates have slightly gone down. It's nothing crazy. It's not like we're getting back to our 2020 numbers. We're still pretty much around the same area, but just a little bit lower depending on what your loan type is, as well as what your credit score is. All of those things go into that. So I would highly recommend that whatever lender you are working with, you reach out to them and see how that could positively affect you. Typically when rates go down just a tad bit, it does give you just a little bit more buying power. So if you're struggling in the price point that you're currently in, this might get you to the point where you can find a house that's really going to work for you in the price point that would be ideal for you. So just something to keep in mind. And just so you know, that also can add an influx of buyers to the market, which means that there could be a little bit of competition in your offers. So just something to keep in mind. Doesn't mean that it's going to happen. I don't know for sure. You never know. But if there are more people that are getting out there and starting to write offers on the homes that they really like, then you may see a little bit of competition. And always talk to your agent about how you can have a competitive offer. Our sellers, I did want to highlight something that I thought was pretty interesting. A couple of agents were chatting yesterday, and we were kind of talking about all of these numbers, how it's affecting our clients, what we feel like is going to happen with the market, and just, you know, giving a forecast on everything and talking with each other. And there was some interesting things that came up. The question was asked of whether people knew that we were in a buyer or seller market. Half of the class said seller, half of the class said buyer. And so I wanted to give a little bit more insight on that. Like I mentioned, a buyer's market would be 6 months of inventory. That's what it is by like definition. And yet we are seeing things change a little bit. The people who did say that this was a buyer's market, they were sharing insight that they felt that their buyers don't have the urgency that is typical for a seller's market. Meaning, they know that that home is probably going to stay on for what we're looking at, about a 46-day average, and most people do want to sell quicker than that. So when you're seeing those longer stays on market, typically the sellers are going to be a little bit more apt to, you know, maybe offering closing assistance or possibly doing a lower price point. That's just the stereotype that comes along with those kinds of things. And so when our buyers know that these kinds of things are happening, they may use that to their advantage and try and get a better deal for themselves, which is kind of what's making people feel like it could be a buyer's market just because of the way that they're behaving. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way that it is. As I mentioned in my last video, it's very important that you price properly for what our current market is. At the end of the day, the buyer is going to determine what that house is really worth, what they're willing to pay for it. So it's important to price that home properly, get accurate comps. When the appraisal gets done, make sure those comps are provided to them so that that could hopefully go along with the price that you are hoping to see for your home. Listen to your agent. Most of the time, we're trying to make sure that you're selling this home for the most accurate number that is, one, going to be beneficial for you, and two, going to be beneficial for this market. So it's very important to pay attention to all of those things. We've covered everything today about our market update for the past month, and more insight into other things, how this benefits you as a buyer or seller, as well as year-to-date numbers and month-over-month, just so you have a clear picture of what's happening in the local market, especially if you're coming here or if you're leaving here as a seller. So if you ever have any questions and want to learn more or have, you know, a more in-depth conversation about this, you can always contact me with my contact information in my channel information. So make sure you subscribe for more videos like this.